6 degrees at O'Hare. Next news, 8:30. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by Papa Nicholas Coffee. Papa Nicholas Coffee, a family tradition since 1897.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. What is the future of comedy? Is there one? We ask the question again, not just because it's essentially being asked in more recent popular stand-up specials by Dave Chappelle, by Bill Burr, but because of the firing of Shane Gillis, who you've never heard about until this week. His termination from Saturday Night Live before he ever participated in a skit, because some independent freelance journalist who covers the comedy beat dug up some old podcasts of his from just a year ago, where he said, he used epithets to refer to Chinese people. He called Judd Apatow a white F word, derisive term for a homosexual comedian or something like that. And he said something that wasn't even like...
nothing was funny in that
podcast. About Muslims. But I mean, it was all rather tame compared to, gosh, I don't know, what we've been used to for 50 years. From Jackie Mason to Don Rickles to Eddie Murphy to Richard Pryor to Red Fox.
And I told you earlier, it seems to me like the future of comedy is what? Just knock jokes? I mean, because no one could say anything provocative or push the envelope a little bit like you used to.
Well, this is increasingly becoming a topic for comedians. And frankly, since so many comedians are like most of the rest of the entertainment industry, men and women of the left, maybe you have some people starting to get mugged by reality, like Dave Chappelle has been mugged by reality of their fellow travelers on the left who are going to end their careers. And you don't need a Me Too incident for it to be over, as Shane Gillis found out. For a practitioner's perspective, we're pleased to be joined by Tim Slagle. He is a stand-up comedian, writer, editor, political pundit. He is performing this week at CG's Comedy Club in Bolingbrook, Friday and Saturday night, 8:30 and 10:30 shows, both nights, 4 shows. Go to cgscomedyclub.com, cgscomedyclub.com. Use the promo code WIND at checkout and get buy one, get one a deal on tickets to Tim Slagle's performance, or performances if you'd like to see him multiple times. I'm sure he'd be fine with that. Tim, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I don't think that Shane Gillis insulted Chinese as much as he insulted comedy.
Well, right. I mean, that's the whole right. That's the criticism, right? It's not particularly funny stuff. He talked about, like, as a comedian, I pushed the envelopes. I really didn't find him pushing any envelopes or extending beyond any well-established parameters. It just sort of was mundane stuff. But that's sort of the problem, isn't it? Mundane stuff, bad comedy, and he's over.
Yeah, well, you think someone who wasn't funny, you think he'd be a perfect fit for Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
Well, how has all of this affected you and what you do when you get on the stage?
It's I have to be careful of pronouns now.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I can no longer say he is a congressman. I have to say they is a congressman. Which, when I do that, it sounds like I'm making fun of black people.
Oh,
I don't know what to do.
But like in the comedic circles in which you travel, is what you're seeing happen, like with Shane Gillis and others, Kevin Hart? Is that having a chilling effect on the material that's provided by comedians?
Well, you have to be careful because you never know when the cell phones are going on. It used to be what happened in the comedy club was like a private function. You could say anything if you're working on a new bit. Sometimes, you do say something that crosses the line. Myself, I don't know where that line is. I jump off it more than I should. But now with cell phones, you say something wrong once, and then that could be the end of your career.
Well, that's
It's
it.
gotta
But you used to not have to worry about saying something that would end your career, cell phones or no cell phones.
Yeah. Oh no. No. Absolutely. It used to be that comedy was the last 10 square. The comedy stage was the last 10 square feet of real estate where political correctness was not enforced. But the correctniks crave that real estate.
Now, is there any way? Because I always, whenever we go to a comedy store or comedy show, I can't stand all the cell phones. People don't enjoy the moment. Is there any way to ask them to put their cell phones down, or do you think there'll ever be a time where they just say turn off your cell phones and keep them in your purse or your pocket?
Well, actually, it's interesting, Amy. There's a lot of the comics that have been getting in trouble, like Louis C.K. It's in their rider that you have to have envelopes provided at the club for people's cell phones, so they can't use them during the show. So I think you're absolutely right. That will be the future, is that you're going to have to check in your cell phones, which would be a great leap forward. Get rid of the spy devices.
Okay, Chairman Mao, great leap forward. So let me ask you this: you're somebody who performs clean, and I've heard many of your bits on the comedy stations on Sirius as well. But you cover political topics, and I wonder, when you say cover climate change and you make fun of the left's climate change predictions, the apocalyptic end of the world stuff that comes from the left on the topic, how audiences receive that?
They can't see the hypocrisy, which is, when Pat Robertson says that a hurricane was caused by homosexuality, it's a joke. But when you say that it's caused by SUVs, that's taken seriously. Myself as both sides seem equally implausible.
Well, right. So, I mean, that's sort of the question is, can the left laugh at itself? Because obviously the audiences that you're taking in at CG's or anywhere else, it's going to be a mixed bag politically.
Yeah. Well, that's the hardest thing with political comedy right now, is that it's a 50-50 split. And it used to be that it was just the left that couldn't laugh at itself. But after being called deplorables for 2 years, I noticed that the right doesn't like being made fun of anymore either.
So then what do you do?
So I have to disguise my political humor. I hide it into stories about feeding snapping turtles.
Feeding snapping turtles straws, plastic straws, I presume.
Exactly.
So the show that you're doing this weekend, how long does it take to prepare for something like this?
Oh, all my life, Amy.
Oh my!
Yes, it's all led up to this moment, Friday night. Yeah.
I've been doing this for 30 years now. I'm at the point where there's nothing else I can do. I have a gap in my resume that's the exact length of a very serious prison sentence.
What is what is your favorite political bit to sort of shock the audience, to get sort of the oohs or even the silence that you're willing to risk it? Is it taking on guns? Is it taking on climate? What is it?
Here's probably the most interesting thing, because there's a big split in age between the first show and the second show. Because the first show, those are the people that tend to have babysitters at home. The second show are people that still live with their parents and want to get out of the house. So I do a bit that if you're talking to tech support and you want to talk to an American, all you have to do is press 2 for Spanish.
That's good.
And yeah, that's the exact response I get from the first show. The second show just looks at me.
Right.
It's like, oh my gosh, it's like my drunk uncle at Thanksgiving.
Right. Yes. Yeah. You're an anachronism. Right. Do you do any impersonations, or are those verboten now, particularly in the wake of the Shane Gillis implosion?
Yeah. Well, I used to do a funny tech support voice when I would do that bit. But yeah, I'm not allowed to do that funny tech support voice, because I was told that I don't look like the guy in tech. And it's like, well, how do you know? He's on the phone.
Right.
He told me his name is Josh.
I know. Isn't that great?
You have no idea what he looks like.
Do you tackle Trump?
A little bit. don't want to give it all away. But yeah, there's definitely stuff to make fun of there. Of course, it is hard to make fun of them because it's pretty much all been covered. It's hard to be a political comic and not be hack nowadays.
Well, and I assume again, just coming from a perspective that's opposite Bill Maher, you don't get the same margin of error, I suspect.
Oh yeah, absolutely not. And it's always been. And I know a lot of conservative comics that you'll never know are conservative comics because they keep it a secret. In society today, it's easier to tell people that you like to wear women's lingerie than it is to admit who you voted for.
Well, now that's a funny joke, and you should use that in your shows.
Amy will produce your show for you.
Yes.
I mean, here's the thing is, who the conservative comics are. You know how you can tell them? Most of them don't do politics. I mean, somebody like a Brian Regan. Sometimes like a Brian Regan I think of. I know he's conservative because he doesn't do politics.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's I know a few, but I don't want to out them.
Well, of course.
Wow.
No, exactly.
Okay.
Right. You don't want to end careers here this morning. But going back to the initial part of the discussion, I mean, thinking about statements that have been made recently from the likes of Steve, forget Mel Brooks, forget people talking about Don Rickles, as I mentioned at the outset of the segment. Jerry Seinfeld saying he's not sure Seinfeld could be made today. Steve Carell saying he's not sure The Office could be made today. I mean, what does that tell you about our culture?
Yeah, well, even Tropic Thunder, do you remember that? That was only about 10 years ago.
Yeah, sure. Robert Downey
that
Jr.
couldn't even be made today.
Yeah, because Robert Downey Jr. was in blackface.
Right.
Yeah,
but it was done
there was also the R word was a running gag in that movie.
Right.
The R word.
And this is the first year, this is the first summer where there was not a single comedy hit this summer. And to me that's probably the reason is that half the most of the funny parts of the script never made it into the final cut.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, it happens so fast, doesn't it? It is really interesting about the lack of a comedy blockbuster this summer, huh?
Yeah, and like I said, Tropic Thunder. That was only 10 years ago.
Oh my gosh, it seems like a lifetime ago.
Yeah. So
he is Tim Slagle. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tim.
Oh no, we got crossed there for a second.
No, I
so,
didn't.
So people are saying that comedy's doing fine. The clubs are thriving. CG's Comedy and Bolingbrook's been doing great. They've been doing sellout crowds. But that's where comedy's going now. It's going to the clubs. It's going to the streaming specials. It's mainstream comedy. I don't know. Nobody wants to invest in a movie that that's going to cost $100 million to. They're not going to take that risk.
Well,
they're not going to take that risk with Saturday Night Live. John Belushi, it's probably one of the only funny things ever on Saturday Night Live. They probably won't be able to run his Samurai Night Live skits anymore.
Oh yeah,
exactly.
We played some of that earlier.
Exactly. No, and then you've got the minders, right? You've got the censors that are all apparatchiks that are going to give all of these movies funnyectomies because somebody may be offended. Yeah. Could you have seen a character during the Obama years attacking President Obama the way Alec Baldwin did President Trump? No.
And I think it's probably the reason why Trump supporters aren't laughing anymore. It's because hey, we weren't allowed to make jokes for 8 years, and now all of a sudden we're discovering presidential comedy.
Well, right. I mean, the old late night talk show hosts, the Johnny Carsons of the world, they would tackle whoever was in political power, whoever was in office, and make fun of that person. But now it's not the same. Now the Jimmy Kimmels and the Colberts, they're weaponized for the left to attack Trump and have Michelle Obama, have Barack Obama do the bidding of politicians on the left while they attack politicians on the right, and it's obvious.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's they were treated with. I can't remember anything vicious on. The only Saturday Night Live skit was that when Obama got mad, he turned into the Rock Obama.
Yeah,
and
I
got
remember
really
that
mad.
one.
Yeah, hilarious.
That's 'cause-
Yeah. Yeah, right. Yes. Yeah.
That's because The Rock was hosting it.
A parody that makes you look better. Vicious. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Tim
That's the
Slagle.
way they hit Jimmy Carter too. After Chevy Chase spent all those years making Jerry Ford look like a bumbling fool. It's Jimmy Carter. The Jimmy Carter impression. He played somebody that was such a genius. He knew how to overhaul a slant six engine.
Tim Slagle, stand-up comedian, writer, editor, political pundit. He is live at CG's Comedy in Bolingbrook this Friday and Saturday. 2 shows, 8:30 and 10:30, 4 shows total. Go to cgscomedyclub.com, cgscomedyclub.com, and use the promo code WIND, and you get a buy one, get one free deal. Tim, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me on. It's been fun.
All right, have great shows this weekend. And he joined us on our Turnkey.pro answer line.
You're listening to Chicago's Morning